and welcome to this week's Dementia Researcher Salon Webinar. I'm Adam Smith, and today we're going to be exploring a question that many researchers will ask themselves at one point or another, which is, should I stay or should I go? And that wasn't just a song by The Clash, right? That was The Clash? I think it was by The Clash. I'm going to look that up. Whether it's at the end of your PhD or funding uncertainty, or whether your job feels impossible, moments of doubt are common. For those working in dementia research, the stakes can feel particularly even higher, with the urgency of work sitting alongside challenges of career path, particularly in academia. Our two guests today are going to bring different perspectives and experiences to talk about this topic of should I stay or should I go. We have the brilliant Dr. Pollard, who is a counsellor and mindfulness teacher who's returned to academia for a second doctorate because doing it once wasn't bad enough, and is exploring freedom and dementia caring experience through the lens of liberation theology, human rights, and personal narrative. And then alongside Martha, for the first time joining us in the salon, we have the brilliant Dr. Amy Lloyd, who is a Race Against Dementia Alzheimer's Research UK Fellow at the University of Dundee, who is studying how microglia responds to Alzheimer's disease using proteomics and drawing inspiration from her early experience as a care assistant. Did I get what you're doing right, Amy?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, good. So for those of you joining us first time in the salon, of course, what we're going to do is each of our speakers today are going to give a short talk presentation for 10 or 15 minutes. They've been given a very brief overview as to what the topic is. So I'm always interested to see how they've interpreted what we've given them, to hear what they've got to say. None of this has been prepared. I haven't seen what they're going to talk about in advance. And then we'll give you a chance as well to ask your questions or to share your own perspectives, either in the chat, or we can welcome you to the stage, and you can join us in the room as well if you want to share your own perspectives. And then we'll have some questions, and the whole thing will wrap up in about an hour's time. This is a particularly tricky topic, I think, because it's a very personal thing. So very interested to know which direction we'll go in today. But Martha has very kindly agreed to go first. And so, Martha, I'm going to invite you to share your screen. I'll stick around until we know that this has definitely worked.
Right. Thank you.
It worked in rehearsals.
Yeah. How's that?
That is absolutely perfect. Okay, Martha, over to you.
Great. I'm really delighted to be here. Adam, thank you for that introduction, which explains what I'm doing in my research now. I am working with the Centre for Clinical Brain Sciences at the University of Edinburgh, and based in the Alzheimer's Scotland Dementia Research Centre, and also the Centre for Experience of Dementia. And I also have supervision from the University Chaplaincy because of the socio-theological elements to what I'm doing about exploring meanings of freedom with carers. Turning to the question, should I stay or should I go? Does research need me? I have a series of questions, really, that I can explore in the context of my experience to where I got now. So this question of should I stay or should I go? The first answer I actually have to that question is I went. So I went once when I'd been doing research for 17 years in a different field from the field that I'm working in now. I'd been an academic lecturing post in psychology, and my field of research then was individual differences and personality, and also epidemiology. So a quantitative field looking at risk of disease patterns across populations, and especially related to psychological topics such as emotion regulation and personality. The decision that I made then to go was hard. I really loved aspects of what I did in my academic lecturing post. I especially loved when I was interacting with older people in the medical research clinics where we were based. They were coming for cognitive testing of various kinds. And so I guided people through cognitive testing in those clinics and really loved speaking with people there. I also really loved working in pastoral roles with students. So when I left my lectureship, I actually left for a combination of reasons. It wasn't just one thing. And actually I had a bit of a crisis surrounding it in my personal life. But underlying all of that leaving bit, which wasn't exactly one moment, it was actually several moments. I left the lectureship and then went back to a research post for 3 years before I left altogether. Underlying all of that, though, was a desire to interact with people in their lives more directly than what I was able to do at the time in my academic role. So I wanted to do something more in the context of community-based support. And at the point I left, I actually left without knowing what I was going to do next. But I went into the community care context. And my question when I was working in community care became, should I stay or should I go? And actually I stayed. And 13 years on, I'm still interacting with people and their lives in the context of community-based support. The form that community-based support took changed for me over time. I began with a year of agency care work, supporting people with tasks of daily living. In many ways, I was actually quite unsuited to that, really unskilled practically, and my colleagues actually found it quite comical, kind of clumsy, if you like. Yeah, I was really emotionally inclined towards people in the work, and I discovered that people wanted to talk, that I wanted to listen, and that I had a kind of natural inclination for working with people with dementia and also with their family members. So from that role, I went into social and emotional support roles with people living with dementia and family carers. And I was in that role for 7 years. And during that time, also took up my counseling training to deepen my listening capacities and skills and allow me to work with people in a wider range of contexts. And I also became, during that time, a mindfulness practitioner and trained as a mindfulness teacher as well. So my third question there is, in the community context, what's pulling me back into research? If working in the community was so fulfilling, what pulled me back into the research? So again, here, there's a combination of reasons, and maybe underlying them all was the desire to contribute to change in the field of care and support in dementia. In other words, a sense of voicelessness, others' voicelessness, and my own voicelessness in that setting. People with dementia find it so hard for their voices to be heard. Carers have continual struggles in the care system and also really fight about feeling invisible. Also, people working as care assistants and in other care roles are overlooked, underpaid, undervalued, and also struggle for their voices to be heard. So people can feel really stuck or trapped in their circumstances, and they kind of cry out for support and change to systems. And I really felt this voicelessness when I was working in the care sector, especially in the particular role I was in, going house to house care work. The level of responsibility that care workers have, yet without any power to do anything about it, and blame that comes at their way, which is not really their fault, I think is a very difficult dynamic for people who are in those roles. So then I ended up returning to research. And when I returned to research this time, what is it that's kept me going? So for me, it's actually been the combination of community-based work part-time, which I still do, and the research the other part of the time that's kept me going. It feels like they enrich each other. It keeps my research grounded in experience, and the research then also opens up spaces for people's individual voices and collective voices to be heard. It also widens the possibilities to contribute to beneficial change in dementia care and support, both in structures and systems through community solidarity, and also compassionate interactions that are based in our common humanity. The context of my research, part-time research, is I actually started in 2017 and I'm submitting my thesis in November this year. So the period of time I was doing my research involved COVID. And I had an extra year added on. It should have been 6 years part-time. It's been 7. Partly because of COVID, when I had to redesign my project, which took quite a while, and also because I was a carer myself, a family carer myself during that time, when a family member had a particular thing that they were struggling with. And so all of that meant I had a whole year extra added. And I have to say, kind of juggling stuff during that time was tricky, and I might have left, except I had a stipend. I got a scholarship for the research that I'm doing now, and that stipend was a really major factor in enabling me to stay in what I was doing as part of my income stream, along with everything else. So it was, quite important. Okay, then. My final question here on this slide is, does research need me, and do I need it after I submit my PhD this November? So my answer to this is resounding yes to both of those things. Research needs me and I need it. I would also say community-based work needs me and I need it. So for the research side, what I don't know yet is the form that will take. My experience of the changing forms of community-based support that I've undertaken have prepared me for being open to differing forms that my research involvement might take. So for me, the pairing of that community-based involvement with research-based involvement feels like really enriching and a balance that suits me and contributes to the common humanity and community solidarity that I've identified in my research interviews with carers that really can support beneficial change in care systems and structures. I work with many other people who are wholly community-based practitioners and others who are wholly academically based researchers. And in each of those cases, their 100% passion for each of those is what drives them. And I think that's really vibrant too. And I feel really grateful to have the opportunity to learn from experts on both of those types of fields, so the community side and the academic side, and to be part of what helps those fields interconnect. And I do that for the benefit of family carers and people living with dementia, and also for care workers. So this is the final title of my thesis. So the liberating impact of common humanity and community solidarity, a socio-theological exploration of what freedom means to carers in the context of dementia caring. But I'm wondering now, and maybe we'll come to the discussion in a while about this, is what are your thoughts? And kind of this question are the questions, should I stay or should I go? And does research need me and do I need it? One-time questions, or are they ongoing questions, and more for discussion? So thank you. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thank you, Martha. And I suppose that it's increasingly, I suppose it depends in what area of discovery you work in as to how much you're driven by that personal need or to try and help the people. Because I mean, particularly I think in the field that we all work in this kind of Alzheimer's, dementias space, that when we've surveyed people before to understand what are people's motivations for joining in the first place, it is either just an interest in science and discovery or some personal experience that why they chose this disease over another disease is often that kind of personal experience or contact, and how much then that motivates people to stay in research. And I guess I wonder whether that's different if you work in one of the more fundamental sciences where you don't necessarily day in, day out actually meet people living with disease, as opposed to somebody who's working in that kind of care or qualitative research space or clinical space where you do. Do you think that makes having that connection, do you think it actually reminds you daily as to why you're doing this, which I think can be maybe a little bit harder to keep a focus on when you're in a lab?
Yeah,
I don't know. Let's ask Martha first, but I'm also interested in Amy, because you do work in a lab.
For me, that definitely helps. I guess I can't predict for, you know, other people's kind of personal inclinations, but for me, that's a really vital factor of keeping that connection with the people, because I'm involved in the social and emotional side. So if I were a basic research scientist, I don't know, you know, what that would look like, you know, for someone who has a different field and a different orientation, and where they feel that their own energies might be best placed at any given time. I only know that for me, the back and forth feels integral to what I'm doing.
Amy, just to bring you in, because I know that, well, I don't know. I'm assuming you don't have day-to-day connection with patients or people with lived experience.
No, so I did. So I was I'll mention it in my talk, but yeah, I was a healthcare assistant for 5 years during my undergrad and my master's, working in dementia homes. And that definitely was a reason why I wanted to do research. Mainly also because I didn't feel like I was a very good carer. I felt like that wasn't my skill set, really. I tried my best, but it was very stressful and was overwhelming. And I knew that, you know, I probably was better suited in research and making a difference there. But I think having that connection, definitely. I mean, these days, obviously being at the bench and being a basic scientist, I don't really see as much of that. But for sure, when I work closely with people that are affected by dementia, it's those times where you just feel the most kind of driven and galvanized to do your research, because you are then recapturing the bigger picture. Because it's so easy as a scientist at a bench looking at a cell or looking at a protein in a cell so far removed from the disease to kind of lose sight of that. So I think for sure it definitely helps. And I definitely would encourage others in the basic science field to do a lot more public outreach, or to be in contact with people that are living with dementia or are helping in the kind of care sector to kind of get that bigger picture back to them.
It just, I mean, I've always found this. I've kind of, you know, I've worked in healthcare service improvement and dementia for many years now. But having that direct line of sight between the work you're doing and the people you're trying to help, I think, really is a massive motivator to keep you grounded, to kind of motivate you to come in every day to do what it is you do. But also some recognition, I think, which do we all crave a little bit of kind of recognition, I think, and you seem more likely to get that. You know, it's funny, it's only ever, I probably get more thanks or whatever it is from people with lived experience who my work doesn't directly help them. I mean, obviously I'm here to help other researchers who come up and say, oh, thank you for doing what you do, it's really important, it's really special. And I know, Amy, Race Against Dementia particularly kind of give you lots of opportunity to do that public outreach. That, and I'm guessing you have this in your day-to-day, that hearing directly from people living with dementia who are grateful for what it is you're doing. I'm not saying we do it for the gratitude, but it helps remind you, I think. Do you feel, Martha, has that made a difference that brought you back to keep doing it?
Yeah, the opportunity to be heard, and also to feed into something that people really feel is going to be helpful. That's a major factor too in my motivation of, you know, they say, I really want to make a difference. I took part in your study because I want to contribute to what can be helpful for others. And yeah, that is absolutely in there too, as one of the factors that keeps me with my foot in both of those grounded places of, you know, with people, and then in research on the other side.
I mean, I know we'll talk more at the end, and Amy, I'll shut up in a second. Let's hear from you. But I think, you know, whenever I completely agree that I think anybody who kind of has that more direct contact, we seem to see more people leaving research who have worked in the more fundamental sciences. I think once people work in that qualitative research space, they I don't know, maybe it's because they have less options for what they could go off and do instead, perhaps. But I think I'd be interested in some research about, do people stick around longer if they have more direct contact with people with lived experience as opposed to those who don't, as to how much of a factor that is to retain people. Anyway, I'm going to shut up and we'll hear from Amy now, who's going to share your slides as well.
Okay, just make sure that it's all working okay.
It is. That's perfect. Thanks,
All
Amy.
good? Okay. Okay, hi everybody. Yeah, I found Martha's talk really interesting, actually. We've got a lot of overlap, it seems. Actually, I think there'd be a whole other conversation just about carers and their conditions and, you know, and that appreciation. That would be for another day. But again, I'm kind of also approaching this question from a personal angle. And as Martha said, you know, is this question just a one-off, or is it, is it something that you kind of repeat throughout your career? And I definitely think for me, it's something that I've faced quite a few times, and I'll kind of go through that in a bit more detail. So I thought I'd start by kind of talking about my journey in academia. So I started off by doing an undergraduate in neuroscience, and it was during that time that I was also started my care assistant kind of career. So every weekend I would come home and I would be a carer for people that were affected by dementia, so in dementia care homes, or also in their personal homes. I was also a carer for children and young adults, and it was great and I loved it. Very stressful at times, of course, but it was great to kind of have that contact with people. And I was doing a neuroscience degree, so, you know, and understanding the science behind it in my undergraduate, and then, you know, seeing, you know, actually the real effects on people the rest of the time was really enlightening for me. But it was during that time I really didn't know if I wanted to be a researcher. And so my first thought was, well, do I do medicine? I've got a lot of, you know, contact with patients. I really enjoy that interaction. So, you know, at the end of my degree, do I do medicine? So I tried. I did the kind of postgraduate entry exam and I failed it. So I thought, right, okay, I need to rethink my life. Not too sure if I want to stay in academia or research. So I thought I'll have a year out and I'll just do a random job. So I was a teaching assistant at the same time also as being a carer. So I did a lot of kind of night shifts as a carer and then into my day job as a teaching assistant. And again, still really not knowing exactly what I wanted to do. And I thought maybe I could be a teacher. I enjoy being a teaching assistant. Could I be a teacher maybe? Is that the way that I used my degree? But I wasn't that convinced that I really wanted to do that. So I thought maybe I'll go back to university. I did a master's. And I really enjoyed my master's. I thought I did a really nice lab project. And I thought, yeah, I can see myself in research. So I thought I'll do a PhD. So I moved to Edinburgh and did my PhD in neuroscience. And again, still thinking, okay, maybe this could be my career. I'm not too sure. And it was during this time where it was a part-funded PhD, a co-funded PhD with GlaxoSmithKline. And so I thought maybe I could go into industry. Maybe that's the way forward. And then I saw with GSK that, you know, departments were very quickly shut down and remodeled to something else, and the scientists would have to completely change their research focus. And so you had to be very flexible, and you didn't really get much control over your research. So it kind of put me off the idea of going into industry. So I thought I'll do a little postdoc. I had a big paper in my PhD that I needed to kind of wrap up. So I thought I'll do a short postdoc, type all my PhD work, and I'll see how I feel at the end of that. And it was during this time that I really did not want to be in research anymore. I was completely burnt out. I was in a completely different lab with a different project that wasn't my area of interest, really. I'd taken it because I needed to finish my paper. And so I was balancing finishing this really big paper that had loads of revisions, back and forth with the reviewers, whilst doing a project that really wasn't in my area with a different supervisor, with a lot of demand on me. And so it was during this time where I thought, I don't want to be in research anymore. This is what postdoc life is like. I don't want to do it. And so I looked at any other jobs. So I've looked at a job in forensics. I thought maybe I could be a forensic scientist. Maybe that could be a career. That didn't work out. I applied for a job. I didn't get it. So then I thought, well, I love baking. Maybe I could be a baker. And then I thought, well, I really enjoy fitness, maybe I could be a personal trainer. And it got to the point where I just wanted to do anything that wasn't research. And then I saw this job come up, this postdoc position come up in Dundee, and it was microglia and mass spec. And I thought, it just sounds perfect for me. It's in the context of dementia research. It's using mass spec, which is a technique I didn't have any experience in, but I really wanted to gain expertise in. And so I thought, I owe it to myself. I've come this far. I owe it to myself to give it another try. This is kind of what I compromised with myself. I thought I'll give it one more try and see how I get on. And so I did this postdoc for 3 years, and it was during this time where I absolutely re-fell in love with science. And I'll explain that in a bit more detail later on, kind of why I turned a corner. But that postdoc really kind of fueled my passion to want to stay in academia and then apply for fellowships. And now I'm at the point where I have a fellowship and I've started my lab. So it for sure was an emotional roller coaster for me. And it took me quite a long time until I realized I actually want to stay in academia. And so I've kind of put in like a kind of graphical form my desire to stay in academia and how that changed over time. And this is kind of what it looked like. So during my master's and my undergrad, yeah, maybe not, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. My desire kind of increased over time in my PhD, and then it massively plummeted in that first postdoc. And then it massively skyrocketed after my second postdoc. And now I'm more than ever absolutely love being in academia. So what changed for me? I think a change of location helped. I think sometimes if you're in the same place for too long, it gets a bit stale for you. Having a change of location is great. I was surrounded by really friendly and collaborative people, really willing to help, really willing to collaborate on new projects, which was great. I had a supervisor that was quite hands-off, but really supportive. So let me kind of guide my project. It was a project that I had loads of, I was passionate about, and it was really productive, really exciting techniques. And importantly, also, it was during this time that I really learned a healthy work-life balance. And that all kind of helped me not burn out again and keep that kind of passion alive. And I think this slide I just kind of put as a way to think about, just based on my experience now going through it, what priorities you have during each stage and what you kind of need to think about as you progress through academia, and if that sounds right for you. So I think during your PhD, obviously you're learning techniques, you're getting a lot of lab experience. If you're a basic scientist, you're learning to critique papers, scientifically write, and you're developing that expertise, and you're gaining some independence, and you're thinking about getting your name on a paper. And then during a postdoc, you're really honing those skills. Maybe you're getting new skills to really kind of build your repertoire of skills that you need. You're starting to be a lot more independent. You're really driving projects now. You're thinking of the project itself, and you're starting to carve out your niche. So you want to be kind of known for, a particular area of research, form new collaborations and this kind of network. People start to know who you are. Maybe gain some experience in teaching or supervising students. And I think then is a time where you're really wanting to kind of get a first author paper, and then maybe think about applying for fellowships. So you're still really quite research focused, but maybe with a little bit of, admin. And then as a PI, I think, again, there's a huge shift, and your main focus then is, applying for more funding, building your lab, writing papers, and really setting yourself as being known in the field. So it's a lot more kind of office based, but you're often still at the bench like I am. So you're kind of balancing that bench life, doing your research with potentially teaching and supervision, and then also writing and getting those grants. So it ends up becoming quite a different, different day in the life compared to, during your PhD and postdoc. And so you need to kind of make sure that as you progress, you're kind of aware of these things, and you want to carry on based on these things that become priority. So is academia right for you? I mean, it can be, it might not be. I think fundamentally, if you're passionate about science, it definitely could be. If you're not, probably not. But it is just that open-ended, I think. People come from all backgrounds, and they'll have different reasons and different motivations to stay in academia. And I think really you need to be passionate, you need to be inquisitive. For sure, you need to be resilient. I've put kind of passionate and resilient in bold because I think they're the main two things that you need. You need to be resilient because, obviously things don't always work out, and you get a lot of pushback in a lot of areas. You need to be able to troubleshoot things. You need to work well on your own. You need to be really self-driven and motivated, but also be really open to collaborations and work well in the team. And you're always learning at all the stages and being open to that. And I think that, again, balancing that, the writing, the data analysis and the research is really important. So I thought I'd kind of list my personal pros and cons of academia, just having been through it now and thinking of trying to leave at quite a few points during my career. So obviously, obvious cons, we're on temporary contracts for quite a long time until you're tenured. And even when you're tenured, you're then, on temporary contracts for your funding. So there's always that element of instability on, how long you've got a job for or how long you've got funding for to do your research. And that can be really stressful. And I think it's really hard to strike the balance sometimes between research and writing, because you want to get the science done, you want to get the research done, but then you want to be writing that into a paper and you want to be writing grants. So striking that balance of how much science to do and when to write grants, when to focus on the science is quite tricky. There is definitely an argument that we are much, less paid compared to other, jobs in science, such as industry. And of course, there's that pressure that you don't have another areas to publish, get grants, and that's often the kind of a yardstick of how you prove your worth, which isn't necessarily fair, but it's kind of the way it is, which often makes you lose sight of the bigger picture. But I'm obviously still in academia, and because there are a multitude of pros to that, and one of the main ones for me is that you have complete control over the research that you want to do, and you're answering the questions that are important to you to understand more about, your disease of interest. So, for example, Alzheimer's disease, in my case, understanding the role of microglia in Alzheimer's disease. You're in control of that day to day, so you're not getting told what to do. You're really carving your niche out, and you're researching what you're passionate about. And in that, you become an expert in your field. And also, what I love is making really exciting new collaborations, having like an interdisciplinary team that can answer questions. You're all answering the same scientific questions, but from different angles, which I think is really exciting. And one of the main things for me really is, making these mini discoveries all the time. So, you're doing an experiment, and you're probably the first person ever to discover this little thing about how this cell behaves, which I think is, amazing. And we often lose sight of that. And so that's a huge kind of motivator for me, is to, you're at the forefront of what's known about that area of science, which I think is amazing. And of course, lifestyle wise, it's quite flexible. So you can kind of make your own schedule. And, that has massive, pros to it, especially if you've got, caring responsibilities or children or anything extracurricular. You can kind of model your day around that, assuming you get the work done. So, final thoughts. I think it's also worth saying that it is okay to leave academia. You don't have to feel guilty if you want to leave, and that's something that I kind of struggled with a little bit, especially after my first postdoc, when I didn't want to stay, was have I failed? And I don't think it should be seen as a failure. It's okay to leave academia, but I think it's so good to give yourself a chance. If things haven't gone right in a certain area, it's good to know there are definitely other chances out there. Maybe moving or trying somewhere else is a good option. I think it's also okay to not know what you want to do for a long time. It took me until my second postdoc to know that I wanted to be in academia, after kind of exploring other options the whole time. So I think it's okay to not know, from the beginning of your undergrad or the beginning of your PhD, this is what you want to do forever. It's okay to explore other options. I think that's fine. And with that, it's also okay to fall in love with, in and out of love with research. Things, don't go well sometimes, and you can get burnt out, and it's okay to have that kind of roller coaster of emotions. But it's also knowing that when you're at a slump, you will come out the other side of it. I think having a mentor is really important, someone that can give you advice that's a bit more senior, that has seen everything, and it can give you advice. I had this really good advice from my PhD supervisor when I was really upset, and I was really struggling in that first postdoc, but I kept going back to her for advice, and I was like, I don't like these experiments. I love the planning experiments. I love writing. I don't really like doing these experiments. And she said, well, that's a PI. So if you can get through these few years, that's what a PI does. And so that's kind of gave me a reason to be like, maybe I could be a PI actually, if, you don't have to love everything. But I think, to get to that point, you want to spend some, of your PhD and postdoc time really getting the skills that you need. So if that's getting new skills and experiments, doing courses on analysis or writing or doing some teaching. I think making sure the environment works for you and finding a pace that works for you. And fundamentally, you have to be okay with failure. Everybody fails at every stage. Whatever stage you are, you're going to get grants rejected, you're going to get papers rejected, and it's how you bounce back from that that's really important. I think if you are okay with that and you learn to understand that it's not a setback, you're learning all the time, I think that is, you're going to go far. And I think that's it from me. Yes, that's it from me.
Thank you, Amy. That was brilliant, and I love that you were a great choice for this because you really have been through that, haven't you? I mean,
yes, when I saw this topic, I thought this probably is perfect for me because I literally have thought of that question maybe at least once every 2 years since my undergraduate days. So, yeah.
Do you think some of this comes because I guess so many people that do a PhD or find themselves in research now that this has been fundamentally a path that you've been on from being a teenager? I mean, from your undergrad straight into potentially into a master's, straight into a PhD. I wonder, so it's no surprise, I guess, to some extent that at the end of that PhD, you're just a little bit exhausted. By that time, you've already spent the best part of what, 4, 5, 6, 8 to 10 years doing the same thing already, and you're still in your 20s at that point, potentially. Well, for some people. That having a gap year, I mean, so having those breaks helped you rediscover your passion.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think, it's a race. It shouldn't feel like a race to get your PhD done as fast as you can and, get to that, get to be a PI, when you're 30 or anything like that. It shouldn't be a pressure to do anything like that. And for sure, for me, having a year out to figure out what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do was essential for me. I mean, I burnt out after my undergrad, so, and I just didn't feel like it. I just couldn't revise very well. I just wasn't, it wasn't working out that way. But then when I came back for my master's, I did super well. I really enjoyed it, and I needed that kind of time out to really appreciate that. And then again, after my first postdoc, just really kind of stepping back a little bit and realizing, what do I actually want to do? And I think a lot of that also is you put pressure on yourself that isn't necessary, just feeling like you need a career, and I suppose a lot of that is because, you need money and you need a job. So, it kind of comes hand in hand a little bit, but I think it is okay. I think it can be, really helpful just to take a little bit of a gap sometimes. And not go flying into the next thing and the next thing, because it's just constant momentum and you just need a bit of downtime sometimes. And I think definitely that helps it be a bit more sustainable. And, and having that healthy work-life balance, I think is essential for that. You want to be able to do your work well, but then go home and, watch trash on TV and kind of just let yourself not think for a bit. And I think that's a really important part of it as well.
So the most job insecurity and short-term contracts remain the most cited reason for people leaving. So you can understand it's not necessarily so easy to say I'm actually, when this postdoc ends, I'm going to have a gap, I'm going to try other things, but it is worth exploring. I think if you're watching this and you're coming to the end and you're not certain and it's, applying for jobs feels like a bad thing, there are opportunities out there for short-term contracts to go off and try something else for a little while. I think we've had some blogs on our website and a podcast on this by Dr Amy Lloyd from Teesside, and a couple of others about how they left academia, went to work in a related sector, but then did come back again. We had a very early webinar of, I can't remember who it was, lady from Australia, was a kind of data person who went off and worked for an insurance company and didn't like it and came back again. So and Martha, I guess you've done that. You've been through that, gone out, tried something else, and come back again. So your motivations for coming back, you talked about. How easy do you think it is? Is it once you're out to come back?
Yeah. I haven't, in some sense or other, I haven't come back. I changed fields.
Which
so,
in itself is the same, you know,
yeah,
same challenge.
Although I'm now involved in what I used to be involved in another way. So so I have come back to that too, but that's happened after coming back to a different field. There was something for me about, I was actually in a tenured academic post at the point I left. And it was interesting to hear you, Amy, talk about how being in control of your work. I actually felt not very in control of my own schedule as in the particular role I was in, and maybe my particular dynamics and how I respond to things. Whereas having a shorter term research contract actually allowed me a little bit to feel like I had a bit more control in a weird way. I mean, I did and I didn't, you know, there was less security, but I had more flexibility in one way. You know, it didn't.
That's a really interesting take on that, because we always tend to put the negative spin on the short-term contracts problem with academia, but equally you could if you wanted to put a positive spin on that, you could say, well, it allows you to work with different people, move to different places, work on different projects, and your skill set can be moved around. So if you're somebody who struggles with settling into the kind of grind of one job for life, actually it could be the perfect career for you, couldn't it?
Yeah,
I like that spin. We can do on that. We always talk about the awful perpetual short-term contract, where we've never looked at it from an angle of increased beneficial flexibility.
Yeah.
I guess it also gives you a chance to gain experience in new techniques as well. You know, you can find a new lab and build new connections as well. So it can, for sure, be beneficial. I guess what's kind of scary though is then if you've got a year contract, maybe for the first 6 months you're kind of happy, and then the next 6 months you're like, oh God, where am I going to get my next job, or do I have to apply for funding and things like that? So I guess there's pros and cons to all of it, and I guess it's just what sits comfortably with you, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and once you start having a mortgage or a family or wanting to start a family, or those things just become less easy, don't they? Sorry, Mark, I interrupted you.
Yeah, they absolutely do. I was going to say, you know, I'm in a position now where I feel like I have quite a lot of choice. You know, I'm not at the beginning of my academic career, and I'm very unlikely to go back into a permanent academic post. I mean, partly that's because I'm not sure I would be a very good fit for one from the hirer's point of view, but also now because I think the same thing would happen to me all over again. And now I have a portfolio of work, so I'm self-employed, so that gives me a range of options that, you know, at the time I was first going in, I wasn't thinking of that. And, you know, I'm thinking of it now only because I needed to make stuff work over time. You know, I learned it. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I think, Amy, you did a really good job at the end there to highlight. You're absolutely right. I mean, are we saying here fundamentally this question, should I stay or should I go, is an entirely personal one that only you can really decide for yourself. Mentors can help you make that decision. I think if you're undecided, there are tips to definitely take away from today. I mean, Amy, you very brilliantly highlighted that kind of skill set, and we've had other webinars on this. We've certainly got a lot of resources to talk about how the things you learn as an academic or as a PhD student or postdoc, that those are skills you can apply in the public sector or in industry or charities or just outside of academia, that those are skills you can use. And I think they're really widely talked about. That's been a really popular topic in the last few years, is talking about how your lab skills allow you to be a good project manager, that your ability to write papers means that your, you know, attention to detail, the peer review, all these things you learn as an academic skill set are really relevant, and how you can spin those on your CV and in your job applications to write an application outside of academia. So there's lots of advice there. What advice have we got, though, for the people who kind of want to stay but just need a little bit of help with the perseverance side of things? Have you got some tips to help people stay motivated and stay wanting to come to work? Amy, you go. Let's get yours first.
Yeah, again, probably quite personal, but I think being informed of what's to come. I think that's one of the things. I think it's knowing, speaking to people that are already in those positions that you want to be in. So if you're a PhD student, speaking to postdocs, or if you're a master's or an undergrad, speaking to PhD students, and just knowing what's to be expected. I think a lot of it is, you know what you're expected in that current role, and then there's quite a bit of a transition from PhD to postdoc, and then the same after that. So it's just knowing what to expect, I think, is really important. And then knowing, can you see yourself doing that? One thing that people really struggle with, I think, from postdoc to independence is your life is so different. You're no longer, you at a bench doing your experiments. You're then always thinking about how to bring in more money, how to bring in, students and staff. And so it becomes a lot more administrative. I really enjoy that. People don't. Obviously, some people don't enjoy that, but it's knowing, what your life could look like or what it would look like. And I think staying informed is really important, and just getting advice from other people that are in that position, and what their day-to-day looks like and how it works for them, I think is vital, just so you know what to expect. And if that looks like it should, would be a life for you. But I think, also what we mentioned earlier, if there is a chance to do some kind of public engagement or some kind of interaction with people, particularly if you're, a dementia researcher, you can interact with people that are, personally affected by dementia in some capacity, and getting more of an idea of that bigger picture of what you're striving towards, rather than thinking of it as, I need to get from A to B to C. Looking at that bigger picture, that's definitely been a motivating factor for me to keep me in science, and to, know how eventually I'm helping people in my work.
Because you're absolutely right, because the grass could always seem a little bit greener, right? I know it's a colloquialism we draw upon, but I think we kind of, about the problems in academia because that's the field you work in, but go talk to somebody who works in industry and they'll tell you about their problems, because not every job outside of academia is brilliant. They might have and I don't think even whatever industry you're working in now, there's such a thing as a permanent, job for life anymore. If that's what's worrying you, sure, you might have longer than 6 months on your contract, but things are changing so quickly now.
Yeah, I think I thought that when I did my PhD, because it was with the GSK, I thought maybe that's the thing. Maybe industry is the way to go. I think that they get paid a bit more, and they've got a nice fancy building and things like that. And actually, multiple departments got shut down during my time as a PhD student. People were moved from one department to another, from neurodegeneration to cystic fibrosis, completely different field. And so some people thrive in that, and that's great. But for me, I knew I wanted to be a dementia researcher, and I wanted to research this. And so I think I learned that, I couldn't fit really in industry because of the way that I want to do research. So it isn't always greener, but you do think, especially when money's involved, I think you think, oh, it'd be nice to have more money. But then, again, having that instability, maybe even more so than academia these days, is it really worth it?
So reach out to the people potentially who are doing the job that you think you'd like to do, to really understand a little bit more whether you're going from the frying pan into the fire, or what the pros and cons are of that job, and compare them then against what you're doing, because you might find every job has some downsides, right? Not every job is brilliant. I mean, they might suit you better, but be certain before making that leap. What about Martha? Would you have anything to add to that?
I'd say it's similar, as well as picking up on something Amy said previously about mentors. So, I mean, when I think back at my time when I entered the lectureship, I wasn't actually sure at the time when I applied for it that I wanted it. Like at that time, I didn't feel ready. And that uncertainty stayed with me, through that time. And at the time, I hear great advice, the things that are helpful from people saying, oh, it's just your lack of confidence, it will come over time. It's a good, it's a good thing to do. It's great to get into research, academic life, I didn't think at the time to step back and ask the question, is this what I want right now, really? And think of the pros and cons and talk to people about what it actually involved, you know. And I think if I'd remembered, that might have been helpful. And subsequently, as I've been making decisions, having mentors who, you know, have the kind of practical wisdom that they've developed over time and can give space to listen to you, like Amy, like you described, of you know, you're describing the thing like, I like this, but not that. And, you know, hearing the kind of, I don't know, the permission to, and the information of actually, you know, you can do that when it becomes, you know, so yeah, the mentor, and also just that space to go and ask the questions of a range of people, I think is really helpful.
And I think if you're struggling right now today, and kind of today you've woke up, you kind of, when you're watching this, you're having a bad day and you're going, I hate this job, I should go. And there are definitely we've got lots of resources on our website that talk about perseverance and resilience and things you can do. That my top tips were definitely kind of things like looking for a small win every day, or seek out that kind of conversation. There are webinars happening every day with people with lived experience that will come on and talk about what it's like living with dementia. Go watch one of those, even if it's an old one from YouTube. Watch a movie, read something. This will remind you that what you're doing is important. And if it's really ruining your life, then clearly you don't want to stay. But if you're just having a bad day and you're looking for a boost, I think looking for a small win, looking at how you're making a difference can give you that bigger picture view. And I think focusing as well on the skills that you're building while you're there, even if this is temporary, you know, looking at what you're learning in the job you're in so you can take that on. And I'm kind of very motivated by short-term goals and time frame. I like a to-do list. I think ticking things off my list each day and saying, oh yeah, I got through that, kind of, it's a minor motivation, but it kind of helps me, keeps me going that I achieved something today, particularly if you're in a job where you don't feel like you're making a difference. And that's one of the reasons you are wanting to leave, is because you're lacking that motivation. If it is purely because you're coming to an end of a contract and you haven't got a job to go to, then clearly that's a very, you know, it doesn't matter how much resilience you've got other than keep looking and talk to those mentors, and come and talk to us at Dementia Researcher, where we've got lots of resources to kind of help you find your next job, whether that's inside or academia or not. And it's interesting, I think, where do we start? Where do we think on research culture? We've only got a few minutes left. It's a big, long time to open this big debate. But culturally, could academic institutions and funders and research culture, I think it could do a lot better to retain people and motivate people into academic careers. Would you agree? This is potentially a topic for our debate series, which we've got running in October and November. Do you find do you think research culture could do more to retain people? Yeah, I'll let you answer that question before jumping in with the answer that I've got. Do you just say yeah?
Yes, if there's anything that, you know, units can do around that, it would be to acknowledge how hard it can be sometimes and give people space to be able to let that feeling be there, and then also ask the question, and yeah, what's gone well today? Do you know, how does it feel when it goes right? You know, so that there's space for both things. Like, actually, this stuff is hard, you know, and we recognize that. And, you know, the university structures are maybe awkward and it feels difficult, but maybe having a bit of space around that for the humanness to come back into what that might feel like as an individual working with those pressures. I think we can do better at praising each other. I think we're not very good at saying well done to each other, particularly, you know, kind of feeling like you're valued. I think particularly, if you're taking on supervision responsibilities, and we all too often replicate the experience we had, perhaps. And I think if you had a supervisor who wasn't very good at saying well done, or, you know, involving you in that way, don't be that person. I think feeling
welcome and wanted can make so much of a difference to whether you want to stay.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one thing that you mentioned, you know, that your life can be hell in your current position. And, you know, if that is the case, and sometimes, you know, you do have to focus on the small things or getting what you need out of that position. But also it's to consider moving somewhere else. I think sometimes, you know, especially when you're transitioning from a junior position to a bit more senior, sometimes a move helps because, you know, if you stay in the same place, you're often seen as that junior person still. But if you move somewhere else, suddenly you're a new person who's bringing in a new expertise and you're seen in a different way. And I think that definitely helps as well. You know, there's, especially, you know, personally for me, I went from a place where I was looking for any other job possible to just moving somewhere else and being around new people who were more, it was a more of a collaborative environment, much more of a helpful environment that really kind of sealed it for me. And so it's crazy that that was what I needed, but that might be what other people need as well. And so I think, yes, surrounding yourself with people that are on your level. And I think that definitely comes from, you know, when you're looking for new positions as well, you know, really that's your chance also in that interview to kind of interview them or find things out about them and get an idea of, is that environment that you can, you know, can you see yourself in that environment with those people? Because you'll notice that, you know, department to department or even lab to lab, the environment and the culture can be completely different. And so you want to make sure you fit in that environment and you can see yourself, you know, flourishing there.
That chance of a reset. So, you know, is it that you really want to leave academia, or is it that you don't want to be in the lab or at the institution that you're at?
Yeah. And knowing that I don't want to do this kind of work in this kind of environment, and that's fine. That's good to know. And so, you know, again, you know, turning that failure into, you know, a learning opportunity. And yes, I think that's definitely a good way to do it.
So that whole self-reflection piece at that time when you're going through this is do consider, is the other job the really one you really want? Is it just that the workplace or the job where you're at now is not right? Not necessarily the research or academia is not right. Yeah, good, really good points, really valuable conversation. Thank you so much, Amy and Martha. As ever, we're coming up, we've got 2 minutes left and we end these things. So we've got an AI that we have trained entirely just on content from the Dementia Researcher website. We have almost 3,000 pages of articles, blogs, podcast transcripts, webinar transcripts, and lots of things. And we've trained it specifically on our content, not learning from the internet. And every time we have one of these, I ask our AI to give me 10 top tips on this topic. And this is the 10 it came up with today for us. So number 1, acknowledge that doubt is common and normal. Number 2, seek open conversations with mentors or peers. These are all things that we've said today, so it's always a good checklist. Number 3, weigh personal values alongside career ambitions. Number 4, identify transferable skills that offer security inside or outside academia. Number 5, recognize when it's time to take a break before making a decision, which I think plays in nicely to that point at the end there. Is it that you just need to move place or have a break rather than leave? Number 6, keep a perspective on temporary challenges. You know, are you just having a bad month? Will this all be better? Don't jump too quickly. Number 7, explore parallel careers in research or research adjacent fields. Number 8, avoid making decisions in isolation. I think that's been made by all of you as well. Number 9, accept leaving does not mean failing. So if you do go, Amy made that point as well. And number 10, define success on your own terms. I like. The charities Alzheimer's Society has put a key metric into all its grants now is what do you do after your current, like your PhD? Do you stay in science? So hopefully the research culture and funders are also going to do their part that we know they need to do to try and reduce the bottleneck and the issues that we've talked about short-term temporary contracts, about funding. Of course, those issues need to be addressed separately as well, that will add into this wider discussion. But we've also talked about that before. That's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much to the incredible Dr. Martha Pollard and the unstoppable Dr. Amy Lloyd. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're going to be back next Wednesday when the topic is going to be advice for job hunting after your PhD, which is entirely relevant, where we've got Dr. Chloe Fawns. We're back in Scotland again with Chloe Fawns-Ritchie from Edinburgh, who's going to talk to that, and Ishita Vamani as well are going to be with us at 12 noon next Wednesday. Also as well, just a quick plug, so we have our salon webinars booked to the end of September, and then in October and November we're going to move to fortnightly, and we're going to have, over that course of that October and November, we're going to have 5 debates. So we're going to have Salon the Debate, where we're going to take 2 opposing sides on some of the biggest topics in dementia research. So we've got in there, should we be funding prevention over cure? Should we, have we learned all there is to learn from the amyloid hypothesis is in there? Should publications be limited to 5 authors? Is the peer review system done with? These are all hot topics that we're hoping to debate over the 5 debates in October and November. If you would like to see the list of topics proposed or suggest your own debate and would like to join us as a debater, do fill in the form, which there's a link to in the Dementia Research community, or if you're watching this on record and it's months later, too late, but these will be back later in the year. Thank you very much again, Amy and Martha, and we'll see you all in the salon next Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.